rent, all of that. When you put all that together, you should save about 30% when you move to the cloud. So that's really the expectation, which is quite significant and makes people really move. Otherwise, why would they want to do this? But you know, enterprise IT modernization is a fairly big effort. It's going to take a long time. But while this is going on, will our customers really wait for us? And that's really the problem. And problem is that IT modernization, even if I did that, will it even lead to digital transformation? So I do realize that I want to be a store or an Amazon-like experience I want to provide to my users and my customers. But just moving to the cloud or saying, okay, I'm doing mobility, which means I'm taking my applications and making them happen on a mobile phone, or taking my email and moving it to the cloud, does that really change the experience at all? So are we pretending when we say that we are doing IT modernization and that's going to create transformation? Is it really going to happen? So are we thinking like that? So that's the question that we would like to ask. And this sort of leads to this kind of an example that, you might have email running on your premise, you move it to the cloud. Yes, you've got email moving into the cloud. You have saved maybe 25–30% of your money. But does that change anything for your business? Does your business feel different because of that? Or are you doing the same kind of things in just the way you would have done it before? And so what people are looking for when they say that they want to do transformation, and this again sort of came up in the previous charts, the film that Hemant showed. Customer experience, operational efficiency, and business model changes tend to be the first three places that people are looking at when they are trying to look at next generation of transformation. And I like this quote, which is actually pretty interesting, from Zuckerberg, where he says that when companies adopt technology, they do old things in new ways. Okay, but when they internalize technology, they find disruptive new things to do. And that's really the challenge, right? So while I'm doing IT modernization, most of my IT modernization is all about taking my existing systems and making them modern on newer infrastructure. But that in itself is not enough, because that's not going to change my business. And really, it's not about just an upgrade or saving cost. I have serious challenges in my business, whether it's trying to improve the efficiency of the business, but more importantly, the look and feel and the experience I am providing to the employees and the customers in my business. So really, there is a lot of work that needs to happen. And what we find is that digital transformation and IT modernization are two different things. They cannot be run together and must be kept separately. And you need to run these in completely two different ways rather than running them together. So now, what is this really, and how do you go about digital transformation is what I want to spend the next few minutes trying to explain to you. So let me just summarize what I have mentioned so far to you, just to give you the context. See, what is happening is that technology is definitely disrupting the way we look at things. There are a lot of new technologies happening, and you'll hear about technology for the rest of the 2 days, and I don't want to spend too much time on it. However, these disruptions are real, and companies need to upgrade and move to the next generation of technology. So that's definitely happening. Now, as that happens, the first thing that the CIO or the head of IT is looking at is saying, okay, how do I take my existing systems and move them to the cloud or to newer technology? All important, but is that enough? By doing that, am I going to be able to change the business? So this is one side from the CIO side of things. From the other side of things, when you look at it from the CEO or the line of business executives, they are saying that, hey, you know what? I'm in this particular business, but I run the risk of getting completely, obsolete, because an upstart in Silicon Valley or some other company in my area is trying to do something that can completely change the game. The fact that you are moving to the cloud and you're going to take 2 years to move there, I cannot wait for you anymore. I need this now, and I need to do it right now, because if I don't do something different, I'm going to be in trouble, because my business will not be around to pay for your IT modernization. So while IT modernization is a good thing, it doesn't solve the problem that the business has. So there are 6 facets that we talk about in terms of what digital transformation is and how do you go about doing it. So our proposal, or what we have been suggesting and writing about for the last few months and a year, has been more focused on saying, okay, you need to do IT modernization, but you also need to do digital transformation. You need to do them separately, and you need to do them now. You can't wait for digital transformation to happen later. Now, if you have a situation like this where you're going to work on something now, how do you work on digital transformation now while you still have IT modernization going on? And how do you keep these two things in sync in some form to make this thing work? And that's really what we've been focusing on for the last year and a half or year or so, where we've been focusing on how to make this digital transformation happen. And I'm going to share a bit of that today for you. So first is, think about the vision. So rather than trying to build your digital transformation to be a specific project that you know exactly what you're doing, like you might have an existing ERP, I want to move it. Think about what you really want to have. Where do you want to go? So define a vision first and figure out incremental steps to go with it, and look at technology to find ways to disrupt into it. The next thing you should look at is to focus on user experience. So one of the important things that you need to do is people are expecting a lot from user experience. Now, if you look, this is kind of fairly obvious, but if all of you were to ask yourselves 5 years back, 10 years back about the equipment and the software and the screens and computers that you had at work and compared them with what you had for your personal use at home, you would have said my work computer is more powerful, has got better, whatever. That's not the case anymore. Most people have much better phones on their personal things, and their user experience that you have on your phone and your personal devices is significantly better than your internal IT systems and your ERP systems. So there is a lot of pressure from the newer people who don't necessarily want to go to these old screens and these 2D displays anymore. People want next generation user experience, and that's really what has become very important. And when you're looking at a transformation within a business, it's not just a transformation of the IT systems, but it's a transformation of the business and the organization. So you need to take your stakeholders and take them into confidence while you do this. And then one of the very important things of how you need to work on this is to build iteratively and incrementally. So you cannot really go and do a digital transformation in one big bang, because you don't know exactly what you're doing. And the way you run this is to run this in short cycles. So you run agile cycles is what people refer to this, and you run short cycles where you complete, say, 3 to 6 week agile cycle, you complete what you want to do, and actually release it with full user experience right into the field, so that you can then run your next cycle, get feedback, collect what you hear, and keep iterating and incrementally improving the product. So this is really how newer products and newer digital transformational projects are being implemented. And all of these things will create major challenges within the context of the CISA professionals. And one suggestion that I would have is that in the organizations today, these next generation of digital teams, typically often led by the chief digital officer, are getting formed. It may be an important point that you may want to make to those guys to see how they include CISA professionals as part of the new digital teams that are getting formed, and some white paper or some reason of why they should be included in this early on, so they are part of the design process of how this needs to happen, is really what needs to be thought through. One of the things, as I've been mentioning again and again, is that IT modernization and digital transformation are two different things. They need to be run in different speeds. What is going to happen is you're going to release lots of small apps that you're going to do on an ongoing basis from pretty much day one, while the IT modernization phase is going to take some time. You can't wait for that to complete. So the architecture that we've been focusing on a lot has been to say that how do you start with an API first architecture, define an API layer on which you can create new sets of apps while you incrementally and iteratively keep improving the back end as well. The data layers of what you're going to build in this whole new architecture are really most significant in terms of how you might want to look at it. And as I mentioned earlier on, it's not about the apps anymore. It's really going to get driven by data. So companies that own data is really where the action is going to be. And this is kind of a chart that I like from a different context, but it kind of conveys the meaning. And the idea is that, say pre-1975, most of the people who made decisions, they were making decisions on the basis of what mainframe to use or things like that. In the 75 to 85, most decisions got made on the basis of an operating system, saying, okay, I'm going to run Unix, I'm going to run Windows, whatever it was. And then people went into saying that I'm going to decide what database to use first, and they said, okay, we'll use Oracle and Formix, and those guys decided what hardware to use. And then it moved to the ERP world, where people first decided I'm going to use this ERP, and then ERP was really the central focus of the enterprise IT and technology. And for the last few years, people have been talking a lot about the apps, but apps are going to get commoditized and become disposable. So really, it's going to be all about data and how you manage your data and how you allow integrations, aggregations, and various other analytics to happen against your data. One other thing that is case for big data is the fact that, one of our constraints that we've had in the IT departments in terms of the speed of movement or the speed of response has been driven by very high structure. So we have been highly structured in our approach on how we have defined the systems, and that allows or does not allow us to make changes very quickly. So over the last few years, especially with big data and various other technologies, we have now gotten to a point where we can delay our structures quite a bit. So you don't have to start with structure, but you can start with data and consume structure when you need it rather than starting the other way around. So one of the other challenges that we see, and I'm sure you will see this in your profession as well, there is a sort of a tussle going on between the CIO and the line of business. The line of business wants to move much faster, and the CIO has a certain path at which they are operating. So as a consequence of that, the line of business guys have been commissioning IT teams or small teams to go build apps for themselves. So people on a marketing team would go and say that, they have a certain app that they want to get built, and they would go and build it without necessarily taking the CIO into consideration. And I want to give you one example of what we see a lot. So one of the most common examples that we hear from customers is this whole requirement for a customer 360. So the experience or the experiment that people tell us is that I'm the head of sales, I have so many agents in the field, they are going to be doing some work. Each of them should carry an iPad, and on that iPad they should have with them a dashboard. When they walk into a customer, they should have information about the company they're visiting, what is the activity there, what kind of people they know through the LinkedIn setup. They should go to Salesforce, pick out sales data, they should look at news items, they should have information about correspondence that may have happened, any support calls that are pending, and then finally, how much invoice and money is pending. Now if you look at building a system like this, you need to get to at least 8 or 10 different systems to get this small piece of data that you need. Now all of these, when you sort of hand them off to some external agency trying to build an app-centric view, all these calls are happening from a cell phone. And that creates a whole set of challenges, because now you are trying to connect from a cell phone to all these things. What happens to security? How do you manage single sign-on? So all of these challenges are sort of getting more and more complex, because say the CMO or the head of HR thinks that IT is an OPEX for him. He just gets it done, and he doesn't have to worry about the whole infrastructure that the CIO has. However, the CIO is in its own challenge in trying to work out how to deal with all this stuff. So, we have been working on a model internally which we've had an API-centric approach. So we start with an API layer first, standardize that, and start building through the API. Task-centric apps that go against the API, and then on the back end we have a big data system that allows us to implement and integrate data sources from completely diverse situations and bring them together, and then expose them to individuals through apps that are very consumable. And for doing this, one of the important things is to define a rhythm, because what happens is there's always this thing that the IT is going to take a long time, so I don't want to do it. If the business realizes that IT can deliver on, say, 6-week cycles, so every 6 weeks we are going to give you incrementally and better and more refined systems, that's actually seen as a good thing by the customers. So as I was mentioning to you, we have about 8,000 employees. We have gone ahead and implemented this stuff internally. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but if somebody is interested, we'd be happy to show this to you. and we have several components for all this stuff. But I want to stop here and take a time check and give you a summary of what's happening in the market. So, clearly we are in very challenging times. There is a requirement from the business to move very quickly, and more of the architecture that I shared with you, where people are trying to build distributed systems where lots of components are getting matched up. There is a large API surface that is being exposed so that you can write apps, and apps are going to get written not only within the organization, outside the organization, and all of this stuff. We have increased significantly the complexity of what we need to provide in the market and to the customers. And while that adds to the work for some of the CISA professionals, there is no choice. Companies have to do this, because if they don't do it, they will not survive. So we are in an interesting spot here where, there are lots of problems that are already there, but more are getting created because of the speed at which things need to move and the complexity of how things need to move, the flexibility that needs to be provided. And so here's sort of what I wanted to leave you with, some basic challenges, and then depending on time we can take questions. So one is, of course, there are political issues within the business between the CIO and the business priorities, security compromises, and all of those kinds of things. And how do you manage this organization structure and manage all this stuff has become a big issue. The CISA professionals cannot say, I need my own 4 weeks to validate things, because there is no 4 weeks to get things done. Release cycles have become shorter, response time has become shorter, people are moving much faster. Surface area that you're working on has increased dramatically. Applications are running in the cloud. They're running in different clouds. Somebody has Salesforce, somebody has some other thing, people are using Google for mail.